lecture 27, where I'll be talking about the famous and typically used 3-point lighting setup. And as the name suggests, a 3-point light setup consists of 3 main lights. And the main light for this is a key light, which defines the light direction. Then we have a rim light, which gives you more contrast towards the background. And then we also have a fill light. So these 3 lights are the main lights for a 3-point light setup. And I will be showing you how to set this up and what it can and should look like if you've done it properly. So the first thing is, let's head over to the render view and start to add a light. So the first thing which we want to do is just define our key light direction. And let's just do that by creating an area light. Go to lights, area light, and just move it back towards the camera, a bit higher than the camera, and scale it up. Where's my focus? There we go. Head back here. Okay, so this is now our main key light, and just maybe also we can just rename it to key so it's more apparent, and bring up the exposure to maybe 15. And already you can see now we get something lighting up our character. Let's change the spread to maybe 0.4 so it's more angled, and let's just move it a bit to the side so it's not fully front lit. Something like this. Rotate it towards the character, and maybe we can move it up slightly and a bit more around and a bit higher. So what I want to do is create a nice shadow side on the left and a key light on the right. So we can actually move it a bit further round, maybe a bit more down, and let's just angle it towards him a bit more. Okay, by doing that, we can now see a nice light direction. We can also boost up the exposure slightly and maybe scale down the light a bit to get a bit stronger shadows, more defined. So now this is a simple light which is just which is just showing us a key direction coming from the top right if you check the image on the left. So now let's start to introduce the rim light. And what a rim light is supposed to do is give you a nice edge around, like an outline of the character which separates him from the background. So let's create another light, area light, and just rename this to rim. Scale it up as well. And this time, instead of facing it to the backdrop as we did in a previous lecture, we will actually be rotating it so it's pointed towards our object. So let's boost up the exposure. Maybe let's go up to 15, and you can see now just by doing that we get some nice edge on his left side. So now the only thing we need to do is place it nicely. We can make it a bit longer and maybe also scale it up a bit more. So now just by doing that we can see that we get some nice edge on him. We can place it around a bit more, rotate it towards him some more, and also play around with the spread so it's not going in all direction but it's more focused. So maybe try also 0.4, which should make it a bit brighter. And now you can already see that we get this nice lit up side of the face. We still get very strong shadows. It's also to do that we have a bounce surface from the bottom. So our backdrop is pretty large. So whenever light hits the surface, it bounces off. So what we can do to have more artistic control, we can actually change the color of the backdrop. And now you can already see the overall the image gets darker because we have less bounce. So this is now a backdrop with 40% gray, which is still fairly reasonable. You can buy these backdrops with this kind of intensity as well in any photo studio shop. So this is now with one rim and one key, and you can see what we get by this. So if we want to, let's just, I would like to move the light a bit higher. The key light should have a more like an angled down light. So let's just move this closer to our object like this, and still a bit higher up. What I want to create is like a stronger shadow below his chin to give us a stronger direction of light. All right, so now we really are lighting up his right side, which is a very cool looking effect. And if you, it depends what kind of style of lighting you want, but this is a very strong, contrasty, high key, a low key setup. One strong key light, and then it's pretty dark. And now the last light which we are missing is the fill light. And the fill light is there to fill in the blacks. And you can see on his shoulder, on this area here, we almost have a black value, and also here. So a fill light is there to just fill in those darker areas. So let's just create another area light and put this on the shadow side, make it a bit bigger. And most of the time it's a bit below the character or your object, and it's facing upwards slightly. So if you put it towards the ground and just angle it up a bit, it's almost like a reflector bounce card angled towards your object. And obviously we still need to add some intensity, so let's boost the exposure maybe up to 15. And now you can see we definitely fill in those black areas. 15 is too much though. Let's first play around with the spread to make it more angled, maybe 0.4 again, and then just reduce the overall exposure. So you can see just by really like slightly blending it in, you can see how the blacks get lifted and it's not that dark in the shadow side anymore. So let's just try something really subtle like this. This might be maybe a bit too much already because we're losing the strong key light. So something really soft, and we can also boost up the key a bit more so it's a bit more contrasty. Like that. We can also move it a bit more round so it's more side lit actually. And we need to angle it again. You can use an aim constraint to always have it facing your object, but this should do the trick as well. And another cool thing which you can do is it's always nice to play around with colors. So what I tend to do is always have a bit warm key light using temperature of Kelvin, something around 4000 or 55, something like this for my main key. And then for the rim light, I always tend to do something a bit more on the blue side, which I think gives a really nice feel to it. And you can see now the rim is blue, the fill is still white, and my key light is a bit warm. It might be a bit too red. So what you can do, instead of using temperature, you can use a color instead. Go to the yellow tones, bring in some saturation, boost up the saturation, and instead of having something more red, you can go a bit more orange to get something warmer. But it's up to you what you want to create here. So as a reference, this would be a typical 3-point light setup as well. You have your key from the left, which is actually filling in a bit more of the face as in my test. You've got the really strong rim, really just on the edge, and then on the shadow side you have the thing which fills it in. And we can also quickly try to create something like this. It's super simple to do. So instead of having our rim be pretty broad on the edge, like you get this really broad light, let's just make it a bit stronger like this, and just a bit smaller as well. So we get sharper edges or shadows, and just angle it a bit and move it more behind the character. And just by doing that, you get a really strong edge. It might be a bit too strong actually. And then you have a very dark shadow side. And just by doing that, you can see this is a lot closer to this. We get the sharp outline and we have our key from the right. If this is too warm, you can definitely always change your colors. You can make it blue, green, whatever you want to do. And one more thing which I want to touch up on is if you have a backdrop and you want to make it a bit more interesting, you can definitely just create a light which is just there to light up your background. So let's just create a area light and play around. And if you don't want your studio lights to affect the background, which is simple to do in a CG environment, you can just move your backdrop back, and the further it's back, the less light it will catch. It's not easy to do in a photo studio because you cannot just really have infinite space and depth, but in a CG environment it's easy to do. So let's just push it back a bit, and now we have all the room to play around with the lights. So let's just select our light we just created, which is light number 4, and just play around with that. So let's put it closer to the backdrop and just boost up the intensity maybe to 18. And now we already see it's really brightening up the backdrop. And now let's play around with the spread so it's more angled, maybe 0.1. And you can see now we get this nice beam of light, which is almost behind him. And now all we gotta do is just play with it, make it nice and like a soft fall off. Make it larger definitely so it's not giving these hard shadows. And you can see now it's a very interesting effect. We can place it down and angle it up so it's more like a filling up the top, like a gradient which goes upwards. And then obviously you can color it. So let's say you want to have it more bluish. You can use also color temperature again if you know exactly what you want to create. Like if you want to have this blue fall off, you can make it larger by adjusting the spread. Oh, you can also play around with the roundness. So currently it's square, so let's just add some roundness. You get a softer shape, use some soft edging to fade it in towards the edges, and bring up the spread again. So yeah, this is kind of how you would create an interesting backdrop as well. So let's just finish off the render and see what we get. Alright, so after the render time, you can see now what we got. We have a really nice rim light. It's a really hard and nice edge which separates our object from the background. We have colored our backdrop with a nice blue light, and we have our main key light direction. And this setup is a very typical 3-point studio light setup. And I hope this showed you the basics of studio lighting, and feel free to play around, try your own techniques, do different kinds of setups. You can do Google searches for interesting light setups, and feel free to share your renders, and I'm happy to comment on them and give you feedback on your results. So thank you guys for watching this lecture, and I will see you definitely in the next one.